hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up, because bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.
Armor of Truth Live numbers 220. Welcome, my friends, to the show. The power grid, drag queens, and propaganda. That's just where the news cycle happens to be today. Give it another 48 hours, and let's see where it is. Today, that's what we're dealing with. Less than 48 hours after the week-long saga of the Chinese spy balloon, the almost completely false mechanism of mainstream news and the narrative has now been recycled. The current regime is a bit embarrassed, and of course, the narrative must be kept fresh in order to keep the people from ever becoming too focused on any one issue, lest they should begin to see through the foggy neon veil of techno-hyperreality and the mysticism of mainstream's daily mimicry. And so, what better way to redirect the minds of the masses than to spin a good old-fashioned yarn about homegrown terrorism and the waxing new boogeyman of white supremacy and militant far-right extremism? We've seen this movie many times. And there is no excuse for not seeing what these people are up to, and there is really no excuse for taking the mainstream media at their word. Most of the alternative media as well. Fakes, frauds, grifters, and agents are everywhere. And there's obviously a plan in the works to shut down the power grid, and it's working. The World Economic Forum just finished meeting in Davos with their yearly powwow. And a major theme was regaining the trust of the masses. So, after that meeting ended last week and a half ago, we saw two big limited hangouts intended to memory hold the most damning facts about the elite's tyrannical and deadly actions surrounding the pandemic response. And the cause of it, too, for being honest. But anyway. These, along with other events, the spy balloon coverage included, and today's topic, attacks on the power grid, all of those stories. These are multifaceted events. Multifaceted, many-pronged operations pushed out from think tanks and intelligence agencies where, in this case, one of the intentions was for you to regain your confidence in the establishment after 3 years of constant lies and totalitarian tactics. The first came out last week. We told you about this, for those of you who were tuned in to Armor of Truth Live last week. We saw this. It's time for the scientific community to admit we were wrong about COVID and it cost lives. And the other was, well, it was this fiasco. Let's get the sound right here. Hang on a second. Boy, I hope everything was right before now. Yeah, here we go. And this fiasco.
No, so we can undeployed develop new vaccines, right? So we have to do that. If we're going to do that, though, there's a risk of, like, as you could imagine, no one wants to be having a pharma company mutating viruses. Yeah.
So the idea that there's some kind of gain of function or, patenting of the virus, whatever. You see that this is. You see what's going on here. So these are examples of how. Well, the establishment is trying to earn your trust back by allowing these things to come out. And the second story was this one. Oh, this was the first, but this was where the medical student came out and gave a confession, where all the right things were said. All the right things were said that should get the unvaxxed and all the science deniers to breathe a sigh of relief and immediately get back on board, trusting the CDC, the World Health Organization, and the White House. And so, but what was really going on here? As you see toward the end of this article, everything looked right. See here at the end of the article where it says, instead, he said we should have, he's criticizing the science community for crafting policies for the people without consulting them. If our public health officials had led with less hubris, the course of the pandemic in the United States might have had a very different outcome with far fewer lost lives. Instead, we have witnessed a massive ongoing loss of life in America due to distrust of vaccines and the healthcare system and a massive concentration in wealth by already wealthy elites, a rise in suicide and gun violence, especially among the poor, near doubling of the rate of depression and anxiety disorders, especially among the young. A catastrophic loss of educational attainment among already disadvantaged children and among those most vulnerable. A mass loss of trust in healthcare science, scientific authorities, and political leaders more broadly. And the confessor here says, my motivation for writing is simple. It's clear for me that for public trust to be restored in science, scientists should publicly discuss what went right and what went wrong during the pandemic and where we could have done better. On down to the bottom, he says, I fear that many are too entrenched in groupthink. Solving these problems in the long term requires a greater commitment to the inclusion of critical, if unpopular, voices. Intellectual elitism, credentialism, and classism must end. Restoring trust in public health and our democracy depends on it. And the room, you get, right? Everybody's happy now. So there you go, masses. Trump train, everybody, you've got it, and there you go. Everything's going to be okay now. And if you were to do a little bit of digging to review the Twitter profiles of Kevin Bass, the young man who wrote this op-ed, and Newsweek's deputy opinion editor, Batya Ungar-Sargon, who recruited and assisted Bass in writing the Newsweek op-ed, you'd find that it all seems to be sincere. It seems to be genuine enough. After all, Bass seems to be sincere. In the deputy editor's profile and tweets reveal or show that she seems to be quite conservative in her tone or in her politics. She ridicules wokeness. She calls out the Biden administration, right? But of course, that is how the game is played. As C.J. Hopkins noted in a recent Substack post on how to memory hole a PSYOP, there comes a time near the end of every PSYOP when the PSYOP has achieved its objective, or the cover has been blown and the heat's getting a bit too close to the major players. And so the focus shifts to damage control. And as much as possible, it shifts to erasing the PSYOP from official history altogether, flushing the whole thing down the memory hole. What is that? Now, we have some new viewers. We have some folks who are looking in who maybe aren't familiar with some of this terminology. Let's make sure we clear that up. The term memory hole, for those of you who may not know, suggests a causing of a collective amnesia. You've got people who are in power and they're up to no good, and they're not jackboot style authoritarians. They're more psychological, more therapeutic in their approach. So, from one emergency to the next, endless crises and tensions, battle lines are being drawn over who remembers what. How did that really go down in 2020? Anton Ceballo on his Substack, a recent Substack post, writes this. He says, those who control the levers of society use media and the internet to excite the public over a cause. But more insidiously, they use it to induce forgetfulness from one event to the next. Only the trauma remains. Classical conditioning. Or, some might say, trauma bonding. Causes a kind of mass Stockholm syndrome. The term memory hole was coined in George Orwell's dystopian novel 1984. It was imagined to be a physical chute where government officials would dump documents down to an incinerator, never to be seen again. The protagonist in the story, Winston, is tasked with memory holing such documents and discarding any deviations from the party line. Ever since, that term has become synonymous with the disappearance of information more generally. Nowadays, there's a common understanding that whatever's on the internet is there forever. Well, that's the understanding anyway. So be careful what you say, because nothing can truly be deleted. Is that right? Is that really true? The internet is actually a very ephemeral place. The further you go back in internet time, the more the memory hole widens. Without checks, it's far too easy to remove what's been put out there. So in fact, what the internet really does is it's worse, because now you don't have to worry. The process isn't just removing something from circulation. Now you can change it. You can just completely change the context. Some of the early internet indexing sites, these would be sites that were indexing all of the websites or web pages that would be produced and taking like a snapshot of every one of them and storing them as they were on that date and time, not to be changed ever again for a good record. Well, some of the early indexing sites came under a lot of scrutiny, came embroiled in controversy because, for example, CNN was allowed to go back and edit their historical content. Others paid to get certain articles included or completely removed. Today, fortunately, we do have two bulwarks against the memory hole. One is the Internet Archive, which was launched in 1996, and its sister project, the Wayback Machine. And these the Wayback Machine saves hundreds of millions of pages daily, taking snapshots, so they can never be deleted. And so at this stage of the PSYOP, a significant percentage of the public have realized that they've been duped, and many of them are not too happy about it. People who never questioned government, they never questioned reality, are starting to ask awkward questions. Why were we deceived? Why were we coerced by our governments, global health authorities, and the state and corporate media into submitting to a series of experimental injections that appear to be causing harm to a lot of people? Well, at this point, it's way too late for those engaged in conducting the PSYOP to continue to deny these facts, that won't work anymore. So it's time to do some limited hangouts, some whitewashing, a little sleight of hand, and generally just confuse and distract the public and send them off on various wild goose chases, while the official story, the official history of the PSYOP is memory hold. It is edited, written, rewritten, and recast in a new form. Limited hangouts are an elegant means of preventing people from exposing your PSYOP. You just hang out there a little bit, a limited part of the truth. Truths that you know won't do as much damage. And then you'll let the masses feed on that, and they'll be grateful. They'll be grateful to get a little part of the truth. They'll be so amazed that you were willing to come clean on the less significant issues. And that you'll just forget about the other parts of it, the parts that matter, which they're never going to give you. That is what we saw in the previous examples. You were given some of the facts. They were hung out in full view like flypaper over a trash can. Masks don't work. Lockdowns are draconian. People died unnecessarily. They finally agree with us, right? No. It sounds so right. But the most deadly details and truths remain unsaid. And they remain true as well. And are now just going to be hidden further from public view. With every day that passes, the truth becomes more obscured, because now we live in a hyper reality. Everyone is engaging and getting their information through the screens. And generally what's happening in those screens is not an accurate reflection of reality. The map is not the territory. The entire official pandemic narrative was rolled out during those first few weeks of March. All of it, masks, mandatory jabs, jab passports, segregating the unvaccinated, the censorship and demonization of dissent, everything, all of it. The whole new normal package was all rolled out at once, globally. And it was never about health. It was never about safety. It is the story of the radical restructuring of society based on lies and official propaganda executed globally through sheer brute force and systematic psychological conditioning. It is the story of the implementation of our new totalitarian global capitalist reality, the new normal, that was announced in the spring of 2020. It is not a story the globalist, capitalist ruling classes can permit to be told, except by crazy conspiracy theorists, science deniers, crackpots, and extremists. All right, folks. Welcome to the show. Armor of Truth Live is written and produced by myself, Brad from Carolina, and my lovely wife, Summer from Atlanta. Say hello, Summer.
Hi, everybody. Good to be here tonight.
Yes, it's a good night to be on the air. It's a hot news cycle right now,
It's actually
folks.
been a hot day.
Yeah, it has. It's been more hot than normal. We ask you to stay connected with us. Join our newsletter, if you would, folks. You can go to the description under this video, and you'll find it there. You can go to armoroftruth.net, and anywhere on these pages, you'll find a link to join the newsletter. That's how you can stay connected to us if anything happens and we're taken off of this platform, which could happen at any moment. We are now officially off our period of punishment
Delinquency.
period. Yeah, our punishment period. So, and if you can, folks, if you like what you see here, if you want to support us, if you're able to support us, check out that donate tab at armoroftruth.net. Look at the description under the link to this, look at the description under this video here on YouTube. And you can also check us out over at Patreon, Armor of Truth. We also have a Cash App, $aotmin. All of that stuff will be showing up on the screen here tonight to help you find out how you can help us. Because there's no other way that this gets done. It has to be crowdfunded. That's the only way to have these days a completely unfiltered report on what's going on. And here what you're going to receive everything through the lens of the Christian worldview, because that's the one that's true. That's the one that can be shown to be true. That's where objective truth lies. What the globalists want is us locked in our homes, working remotely off an electric grid that is today backed by fossil fuels, of course. They want it backed by solar and wind, which is silly and ridiculous because it could never happen. It would never work. It's not possible. Not at this point. If you don't agree, see Alex Epstein's book, Fossil Future, for complete debunking of the green movement. He's also done an interview with Jordan Peterson on his YouTube channel, debunking the green movement. And it was a fruitful interview. You got a lot of information there to help you with when you need to be able to respond to people who challenge you about the green movement, about saving the planet. But the globalists, the New World Order, right? The elites, the establishment, whatever you want to call them, those who have control of the levers of power. They're starting to get their wish, even though it's a ridiculous wish. We've had yet another mysterious attack on the energy grid. Actually, the FBI, heroic as they are, thwarted this attack before it could ever happen. Isn't that nice? Isn't that convenient? But as they said, look, it was going to be bad. It was going to be really bad. I mean, you ought to see these cads, these characters. You ought to see these gangsters that they nabbed just in time. Really bad. It's going to be really, really bad. We really, really mean it. And this has been happening all over the United States. Actually, it's been happening in other parts of the world too. The narrative goes like this. The United States infrastructure is very fragile. And there are those out there who would do us harm. They are ideologically motivated. In fact, they are racist. They are white supremacists. There was an attack in North Carolina back on December 3rd that knocked out power to over 45,000 people. The lights went dark on Christmas Day for 14,000 customers in Washington state. And the FBI says 2 men attacked the electric grid. Also, Portland, Oregon, Los Angeles, LAX, an attack on the substation at LAX, and on and on and on. Politico recently wrote, physical attacks on power grids surged to a new peak. They say people are shooting, sabotaging, hacking by computer equipment that delivers electricity, and these attacks are at the highest levels since 2012. Now, authorities, here's what's interesting about this too. Authorities have yet to identify any suspects in the North Carolina attacks and have only been able to speculate about motives. And speculate they do. There is a whole narrative here. Now, this increase in power grid attacks has spiked in a big way over the last year. Consistent attacks on the power grid. Or that is the report anyway. Is it being done on purpose? What we do here is narrative analysis. We just take what they're giving us and compare it to what they've said before And then hold that up to what we know to be true. Grammar, logic, rhetoric. That's how we work it out here. Is it Russia? Is it China? Why aren't all reporters all over this story? Why is it not being covered and analyzed and investigated at the same level of scrutiny as Trump's tax returns? Or at the same level of scrutiny of the anti-science, anti-vaccine community or something? They spend a lot of energy and money and time on covering those topics. America's energy infrastructure is being attacked on a regular basis and no one seems to care. The COVID narrative has completely fallen apart so many times that they need a different scheme every day now. What we can know, and from what we learn on an ongoing basis from analyzing the official narrative, is that the power grid attacks fit perfectly with this globalist agenda that we've already stated. Their playbook, Agenda 21, originally, now loosely known as 2030, but it's sustainable development. This playbook has been in place for decades now. Climate lockdowns are coming. They do not want you using a car. They want you on a bike living within a 15-minute walkable city. Right here where we live, near where we are, we can see they're constantly building walkways and bike paths, which is great. That's pretty awesome. You've got these things to use. But one day, the switch is going to be flipped, and that's going to be the only way to get around. Well, that's the goal. I personally don't think they're going to make it there, but that's just me. They want us on wind and solar, working from home, taking universal basic income or some mixture thereof. They want us using only digital currency, and they want all of this so they can track and watch every single thing that we do. By shutting down power grids and forcing people to believe in solar panels, right? People will just say, after a while, if when this kicks off and when it starts happening, people will be like, I just can't put up with this power going out anymore. I'm going to get off the grid, right? Which is interesting too, because if you look around on YouTube and you watch some of the channels, but people who are said to living off grid in one way or another, they're very much attached to the grid or the system. Very few people who are really living off the grid. But they want you to be thinking, oh, I really need to get some solar panels. I need one of those power bricks in my house. Some solar on my roof, so we'll be really protected. What they're doing is forcing people's hands. They're coercing people. After the Nord Stream pipeline explosion and destruction, they came out and told us, hey, that was a good thing. That's a good thing that happened. That it would speed up our transition to green everything. Bill Gates said it. Anthony Blinken said it. Pete Buttigieg said it. Sorry, that's Pete Buttigieg. It's the fast track to renewables. That's what they said. That's what Gates said. And as Saul Alinsky said in Rules for Radicals, you never let a crisis go to waste. Sometimes you'll create one and not let it go to waste. It might be true that our infrastructure is garbage. It could be, because this plan has been on the books since pre-1970s, enough time to allow the infrastructure to age and become obsolete in many places. Energy companies are now asking you to turn off your heaters, California, New York, urging customers to conserve energy due to increased demand. The Biden administration literally shut down natural gas to the Northeast, and they don't want us using gas stoves anymore. Don't charge your electric cars. It's draining the system. Is it not funny how electric cars, the production, and then the maintaining of them, the very energy that goes into those batteries, it's all backed by natural gas and fossil fuels. So the answer they give us always is conserve, stay at home, save the planet. Folks, nuclear is the answer. And you know it's the answer. They know it's the answer. We know it's the answer because it's the one that they will never address. So anyway, here's the narrative. Let's see what's happening really, and let's go the other way. All right, that's what we want to help you out with here today. So here's where it starts. Article from CNN. Now, there's a really interesting point here to make about the timing of these articles. Check this out. This comes out on February the 4th. Let me make sure I got the right article up here. Because what happened was, I'll show you this. Look at all these. Look at all. This is just a search, and if you'll see up here at the top, you can't see my cursor, but right up there at the top, you'll see any duration. You'll see January 29th through February 5th of this year. I just did a search for power grid attacks. Is it not interesting that on up until the day before of this announcement that the FBI had arrested these powerful gangsters, you'll see in just a bit. Summer's going to show you how intimidating these people are. But check this out. There's just 3 days ago, 6 days ago, 3 days ago, January 30th, 6 days ago, January 30th, 6 days ago, 5 days ago. Why in the world do you think that all of a sudden on Saturday there would just be a flood of articles? Did everyone get the same idea at the same time? It's just magically everyone, we need to put out an article about how vulnerable the grid system is. A vulnerable power grid is in the crosshairs of domestic extremist groups, and they want to attack the power grid to start a race war. That's the narrative. Yeah, here's the article from CNN on February 4th, a vulnerable power grid. Brian Harrell, a former U.S. Department of Homeland Security Assistant Secretary for Infrastructure Protection, told CNN, quote, "There's no doubt in my mind that 2023 is probably going to be, there's no doubt that probably, whatever that is going to be the most catastrophic when it comes to the uptick of DVE, that is domestic violent extremism, attacks on electricity infrastructure." He continued, "A number of individuals and extremist groups online right now have already signaled that this is a part of their playbook." Have they? The article goes on to say that the motive behind the December 3rd attack in Moore County, North Carolina, for 45,000 people went without power for about a week. They still don't know. Still don't know who did it. And they don't have a motive, but they don't mind telling you that it was definitely white supremacists. It has to be. Why? Because the FBI said so. It also came after this story that we're going to show you, our main story in just a minute, also came after an FBI bulletin in November warned of threats by extremist groups who said they were going to, quote, create civil disorder and inspire further violence. Harrell said, quote, "This typically very primitive style attack equals millions of dollars in damage. If you were to shoot out some very key components, you can quickly create an effect where this large multi-million-dollar transformer becomes essentially a paperweight." Well, why don't we just go ahead and tell people how to do it. Please note here, this was 2 days before. This was the day of the Chinese spy balloon. That's when that thing got shot down. All this came out. This hit the mainstream media February 4th, complete with every single talking point represented. All right, so now I had this for the video. Here's a short clip from the scene. I surely hope we don't get an ad on this thing, but if so, I'll protect your ears.
A chilling neo-Nazi-led plot to attack a major power grid, revealed today by authorities in Maryland. They've charged Brandon Russell and Sarah Clendaniel with conspiracy to damage energy facilities surrounding the city of Baltimore.
Clendaniel and Russell conspired and took steps to shoot multiple electrical substations in the Baltimore area, aiming to, quote, completely destroy this whole city.
Court documents say Russell and Clendaniel were in a relationship and corresponded while they were being held in separate prisons. Russell was in jail for possessing bomb-making materials. Clendaniel was imprisoned for robbing a convenience store with a large butcher knife.
They had extremist views, and in order to further those views, they hoped that conducting this violent act was going to bring light to that.
Prosecutors say Brandon Russell founded.
All right, I'm going to hold off on this part because this is what Summer's going to tell you about in just a little bit about the background of this. I don't know. Let me just keep going and not give too much away here. So as we build this up for you, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Project Operation Mockingbird, especially CNN. Hang on, let's listen to just a little more narrative here. This comes from MSNBC. This was yesterday.
Like mine had to explain, condemn, and apologize for. We had a war on terror. Yeah, Muslim terror.
Let's go back.
With Eddie Hassan sitting in for my good friend Chris Hayes. For years, terrorism was seen as a problem within Islam, a threat from Muslims. An issue that people who look like me, with names like mine, had to explain, condemn, and apologize for. We had a...
All right, that's a major element here, is that they want this threat to be closely tied, to be seen and experienced, thought of in the same context as of Islamic extremism, Islamic terrorism. They want you to, just like we were told that our enemies were Muslims from 9/11 on, and that was never really the case, as we find out. And things we're not going to be able to say here, maybe I've said too much already. What we come to find out is the greatest threat comes from right inside our own home, from right inside our own country.
War on terror. Yeah, Muslim terror. 9/11, obviously, and Al-Qaeda, and then ISIS. And yet the truth is that between 1994 and 2020, there were nearly 900 terrorist attacks and plots here in the United States, and the majority of them were perpetrated not by Muslims, but by right-wing terrorists and white supremacists. And that brings me to tonight's news of a new alleged far-right terror plot to, quote, completely destroy the city of Baltimore. It is a terrifying story that involves a neo-Nazi.
Okay, narrative. Completely destroy the city. Listen to it, just a couple more on this. Here is a, let's see, let me get my notes here. This is, we'll look at a report from Orlando, because that's where the guy's from, and then from Baltimore, where the girl is from. This is Baltimore.
A Maryland woman is now facing federal charges accused of conspiring to attack our local power grid. Prosecutors say the woman was working with a man in Florida. Their plot targeted power substations in Baltimore City and Baltimore County.
And WJZ live at the federal courthouse downtown in Abijoy Burnett tells us how the two suspects met and why it's believed they may have been motivated by hate. Abijoy?
That's good enough. Motivated by hate. That's the narrative. That's what you're meant to be focused on. Here's another quick one. This one's from Orlando.
Good morning. My name is Eric.
This audio's bad.
We are here this morning to announce the arrests of Sarah Clendaniel and Brandon Russell on criminal complaints for conspiring to attack our local power grid. As the criminal complaint alleges, Clendaniel and Russell conspired and took steps to shoot multiple electrical substations in the Baltimore area, aiming to, quote, completely destroy this whole city.
The accused were not just talking, but taking steps to fulfill their threats and further their extremist goals. Russell provided instructions and location information. He described attacking the power transformers as the greatest thing somebody can do.
The greatest thing that someone can do. Wow, that sounds really serious. He said it was the greatest thing that someone could do. Well, he's much to be feared, I guess it is. Look, it goes on and on. We've got many examples of local news outlets. You know, you don't have to look very far to, let's see, maybe I can get something really quick here. We did this. Yeah, here you go. This is, just watch this.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about trouble and irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets.
Okay. We all get the point, Brad. That's enough. You see what we're talking about here, right? So the CNN article goes on to say that the number of power grid attacks or incidents of vandalism on high voltage power equipment nearly doubled in 2022. This is from Business Insider, actually. Electrical substations are a tempting target for neo-Nazis, they say, including so-called accelerationists who believe that causing chaos through power outages could lead to a race war. Most of the more than 40,000 transformer stations throughout the U.S. are protected by little more than chain link fences. Why is that? How did that happen? Perpetrators behind most attacks are never apprehended. Why is that? But the arrests of Russell and Clendaniel are the latest example of federal authorities pointing the finger at far-right extremists. Last year, 3 men between the ages of 20 and 24 pleaded guilty to making plans to try to knock off substations across the U.S. to instigate a race war or an economic catastrophe. Or at least that's what they're reporting to us. In a probable cause affidavit, the FBI detailed the accusations against Clendaniel and Russell and alleged that the couple planned an attack on an encrypted communication application. Apparently not all that well, not truly encrypted. Russell, who the FBI said admitted to subscribing to Nazi beliefs during an interview, that could mean anything. Said, quote, made statements in direct messages to an FBI informant throughout much of 2022 regarding conducting critical infrastructure attacks, including statements about sniper attacks against substations and how conducting a small number of them could cause a cascading failure. The threat posed by domestic violent extremists is evolving and persistent. FBI Special Agent in charge Thomas J. Sobczynski said, the FBI alleges that starting in September of last year, Russell encouraged the informant to plot their own infrastructure attack before including the informant in his planned attack on the Maryland electrical grid. Russell told the informant that he wanted to maximize impact and would love to coordinate to get multiple substations at the same time, the FBI alleges in their affidavit. And of course it said the young lady there said that she wanted to accomplish something worthwhile or legendary. Now, I want to show you another little clip here about what they said that they, when they arrested him, he had been arrested before. Let's see, I think it's in.
An Orlando man has been arrested and charged with plotting with...
Yeah, it's in this one. Now, just listen to what they say when they searched him, when they searched his home, what they say they found there. You'll find this interesting.
charge Brandon Russell with conspiring to damage a U.S. energy facility. This is a mugshot of 27-year-old Brandon Russell of Orlando from his 2017 arrest in Tampa for possession of bomb-making materials. Federal agents say at the time they were investigating the murder of 2 of his roommates by a third roommate when they discovered Russell's stash of explosives as well.
Now that's weird right from the start. There were 2 people in his place got murdered. Summers got more details about that.
As a photo of Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh on his nightstand.
What?
Russell.
What? Did you catch that?
Explosives, as well as a photo of Oklahoma City bomber Timothy McVeigh on his nightstand. Russell was sentenced to 5.
On his nightstand? What? You mean like a picture of his mom or his girlfriend, or like a husband would do, a wife? Do you really believe that he had like a little picture of Timothy McVeigh on his nightstand? That's propaganda. Likely. Your best evidence also, folks, that this is an operation of some kind. That's one of them. But also, there is no mention ever. When have you ever heard the FBI say anything about the Marxists, extreme leftists who have actually been vandalizing America before and through and after the pandemic? No scholarly studies, no media campaign, no fear-mongering, nothing. In fact, look at this website. It's out here, just sitting there. Beautifultrouble.org. Creative tools for a more just world. Dive into the Beautiful Trouble toolbox, an interconnected web of ideas and creative best practices that puts the power in your hands. This is a leftist extremist promoting website. Tactics. Let's look at the tactics quickly. They offer tactics. They offer training in advanced leafleting, app flooding, artistic vigils, autonomous servers, how to get arrested, how to do a citizen's arrest, how to do civil disobedience, how to do creative disruption, right? Cultural disobedience, culture jamming. Culture jamming is when you alter a brand or meme to make a subversive political point, like when you saw Nike or Walmart with their BLM, in support of BLM throughout the summer of 2020. That's culture jamming. So anyway, this is all right here, and it's just a big, slick-looking website. Who knows? We haven't done any research to see who's behind this, but nevertheless, there it is. Nonviolent search and seizure. Infiltration, they train here. Jail solidarity. Putting pressure on authorities after activists are arrested can create a strong community of resistance. Right. So that's there. And we don't see where are the that's been going on for years now. Look at and we showed you all the search results also here. All these search results from 2 days before this story came out in the news. A full 2 days before this arrest happened. So we're just here reporting. We're not. As Vody say, we're not writing the mail. We're just delivering it. Now, before summer gives you details on this that are going to bring it on home for you. You're going to be able to understand this a lot better. Let me take a moment to show you, if you've never heard, what Operation Mockingbird, I can't remember if it's Project or Operation, it's one of the two. But Mockingbird. Let's listen to, say that again.
Operation Mockingbird.
All right. Operation Mockingbird. All right. Here's a YouTube channel called The Pacifist, who's done a good job of this. We'll listen to a few minutes here.
the CIA was able to implement a mass media manipulation system, allowing them to control a good portion of public perception. They had the ability to release media that fit their narrative while censoring those they did not like, as long as it was under a company under their control. Companies such as CBS, Time Magazines, New York Times, New York Herald Tribune, New York Post, The Washington Post, Louisville Courier-Journal, and Copley News Services. Another aspect of Mockingbird was the hunt for a communist sympathizer in the press and in the film industry. Investigation would be carried out looking just for a sniff of leftist ideas. In one instance, an investigation was carried out into the Hollywood film industry. This resulted in 11 offenders, 10 of which immediately sent to jail for a short period of time and blacklisted. This type of experience was not uncommon for those involved in the media and associated with the left. An American actor who goes by the name Lee J. Cobb described the experience. The blacklist is just the opening gambit, being deprived of work. Your passport is confiscated, that's minor, but not being able to move without being tailed is something else. I was pretty much worn down. I had no money, I couldn't borrow. I had the expenses of taking care of the children. Why am I subjecting my loved ones to this? He later succumbed to the pressure and began cooperating with the CIA. While Mockingbird was able to operate secretly for some time, they could not stay in the shadow forever. In 1964, David Wise and Thomas B. Ross would publish The Invisible Government, a book going into detail about the CIA's covert activities and how the CIA operated. From there, just 2 short years later, Ramparts would publish the first expose of Operation Mockingbird. Sol Stern, the writer of the expose, described the experience. Until the Rampart story broke, the government could count on the mandarins of Washington Post journalism to protect national security secrets. But as detail of the front group spilled out, editorials in the Time and the Post skewed the secret funding arrangement and compared it with the methods used by America's Cold War enemies. The CIA.
And so later on, the Church Committee was where it was ultimately brought out into the open. Now we have this clip from the Fifth Estate. This is a good clip too. I'm not going to play it all. I've got some timestamps here. The reason we're showing you this is to give you some context. Maybe you haven't heard of this. Maybe you have. Maybe you just need some refreshing. There is no good reason for any of us to take what CNN is saying, or MSNBC, or Fox News for that matter. There's no reason, no good reason why we should trust what they're telling us, especially when it has to do with ideologies and moral arguments.
We all know that you can't believe everything you read, but at the same time, most journalists do try their level best to get the facts straight. It requires checking and, wherever possible, a first-hand account of what's happening. But an eyewitness account is not always possible, particularly in nasty wars on the other side of the world, and so reporters sometimes have to rely on other people's accounts. The story then becomes as good as its source, and sources sometimes lie. The U.S. Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, deals in information and misinformation. Tonight we see how the CIA has been able to plant news reports that aren't just inaccurate, but totally fabricated.
All right, so I'll jump ahead here. We're going to meet a man called John Stockwell, former CIA agent. Here you go.
John Stockwell, wearing the cross, worked for the CIA for 12 years. As a colonel, his last assignment was to run the U.S. campaign in Angola.
The basic theme was to make it look like a Russian and Cuban aggression in Angola. And so any kind of story that you could write and get into the media anywhere that pushed that line, you did. 1/3 of my staff in this task force was covert action, was propagandists, whose professional career jobs was making up stories and finding ways to get them into the press.
In 1975, the resource-rich...
All right, so without going into the detail on the Angola story here, let's go to this clip here. We just want what they're saying about the CIA.
The CIA had just closed down 3 long-term paramilitary operations in Southeast Asia. Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. They'd had over 1,000 paramilitary case officers come flocking back to Washington. They didn't have desks for everybody, much less jobs, and morale was rock bottom low. They wanted a covert action. They wanted a paramilitary encounter. The first briefings on Angola literally went, gentlemen, this is a map of Africa. Here is Angola. And then they went on with a chart to explain there are 3 liberation movements in Angola. One of them is headed by Holden Roberto. He's the good guy. We've worked with him for years, and they use literally good guy. Then the MPLA is headed by this drunken, psychotic Marxist poet, Agostinho Neto. He's the bad guy. And they used exactly so to make sure that people understood.
Once the National Security Council had given its blessing, Stockwell and the CIA cranked up their propaganda machine, and newspapers around the world became unwitting accomplices in the campaign. From the CIA's headquarters, Stockwell sent his propagandists to Britain, Portugal, Zambia, and Zaire. Far from the battlefield in Angola, they wrote news releases for the 2 Western-backed factions, and these were fed into the ticker tapes of the Western media. Stockwell's CIA man also wined and dined Western journalists and gave them personal briefings. His man in Zambia was particularly enthusiastic.
He ran a story that the city of Malanje had been captured by the UNITA forces, and in doing so, it captured 20 Russian advisors. And they thought this would show that Russians were running the thing in Angola. There weren't Russian advisors. It wasn't a factor, and we knew that.
But the story did well. The Toronto Star, like many newspapers, picked it up from Reuters news agency. It was also carried in the Montreal Gazette and in the Vancouver Sun.
I remember reporting that very clearly.
Fred Berglund was the Reuters reporter who filed the story from Zambia.
Years later, I discovered that a little CIA misinformation expert had sat in the U.S. Embassy in Lusaka and had composed that communique, and it bore absolutely no relationship at all to truth. You've got to remember, at that stage, during a war, you're working under incredible pressure. I worked for 4 months without a day off for 16 hours a day. And all that was wanted was a flow of information. I mean, I'd done the same in the Middle East War. I was based in Damascus. And in the first week of the war in Damascus, I wiped out the Israeli Air Force 3 times over, with official statements.
Reuters, with its headquarters here on London's Fleet Street, is one of the world's largest news agencies. Its international bureaus provide many newspapers with their only source of news from far parts of the globe.
Well, I mean, with hindsight, some of the official statements from the side I was reporting, and I stress from the side I was reporting, but also from the side that people in Luanda, where the MPLA reported, clearly most of those statements were completely false.
The CIA man in Zambia soon came up with an even better story.
He had some Cuban soldiers raping some young Angolan girls. Then there was a battle, and he had that Cuban unit cut off and captured. And then he had the Cuban women, the victims, identifying their rapists. And then there was a trial, and they were convicted. And then he had them executed by a firing squad of the women who had supposedly been violated, with photographs of young African women with weapons shooting down these Cubans. There had never been a rape. There had never been the military action. The Cubans had never been captured. It was all fiction.
Fiction, maybe, but it showed up on the front page of papers like the Toronto Star. The Toronto Globe and Mail also ran the story, and its headline attributed it to Angolan guerrillas. Many other Canadian newspapers in cities like Winnipeg, Montreal, and Halifax picked up the story.
Basically, and to put it very crudely, you can publish any old crap you like, and it will get newspaper room.
The CIA efforts at disinformation continued to turn up. In 1982, reporters were shown photographs of what the CIA said were Soviet bases in Nicaragua, identifiable by their Soviet-styled obstacle courses, training areas, and guns.
I used to laugh and say, look at that Soviet-style baseball diamond over there, this is almost foolish, really, to talk about this. First of all, they're not Soviet military bases. That's the whole point. The second is that a barracks is a barracks. An obstacle course is an obstacle course.
Soviet freighter Bakuriani pulled into the Nicaraguan port of Corinto today, carrying a mystery cargo which could lead to a showdown between the Sandinista...
Just over a year ago, on the day President Reagan was re-elected, his administration came up with another Nicaragua story. This one had to do with Soviet MiG fighters, which Washington said had been shipped to Nicaragua in some mysterious crates detected by satellite surveillance. The result was more headlines. But as the story developed, doubts began to emerge.
Ronald Reagan had a warning today for Nicaragua and for the Soviet Union. Reagan said the U.S. still cannot confirm reports that Nicaragua has received a shipment of MiG-21 jets. But he said if the reports turn out to be true, the U.S. would take a very dim view. The Nicaraguan government has denied that crates taken off a Soviet freighter today contain any warplanes, and it's accused Reagan of trying to whip up an invasion fever.
By week's end, U.S. officials were saying there weren't any MiGs after all.
It's the usual thing. The charge makes the headlines. The retraction makes the inside pages.
And that's a huge point. The charge makes the headlines, but the retraction gets lost somewhere. Now, this is in the days of mostly print media, and you saw those newsrooms there. There were some computers there, but they didn't have the capabilities that are available today. No, let's just listen.
5 years in prison. This morning, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Maryland announced
familiar?
Russell has been
Are we-
arrested again. This time, investigators say he and his girlfriend, Sarah Beth Clendaniel of Catonsville, Maryland, are charged with plotting to attack multiple power substations around the city of Baltimore.
As the criminal complaint alleges, Clendaniel and Russell conspired and took steps to shoot multiple electrical substations in the Baltimore area, aiming to, quote, completely destroy this whole city.
According to the FBI, the couple was fueled by a racist, extremist ideology and believed by conducting the attack they would bring further light to their views. The arrest affidavit says Russell started his own nationalist social group called the Atomwaffen.
All right, we'll get to that in just a minute. I was doing a search there because we've showed you here before. Before the war, before the Gulf War. This is when George H.W. Bush was in office. The propaganda was just heavy and thick, and one of the final straws that just got the American people, just won us all over, was this video of this daughter of a Kuwaiti man, this young Kuwaiti girl who was describing how the Iraqi Republican Guard had come into Kuwait and come into the hospitals, and they had taken babies out of incubators and left them to die on the cold floor. And it was just completely made up. It was marketing. It was marketing complete. And the Fifth Estate actually is the news agency that did that report, the one I remember seeing anyway. So that's where we are. We have to be very, very careful. Especially when we see pictures like this. I'm not saying that these people don't exist. I'm not saying these movements don't exist. Summer's going to break it down for you here with some more details in just a second, but come on. This is like these two who met in jail, and this is just really a bit over the line.
A couple of years ago, patent attorney Vanessa Otero ran into a problem that just about anyone who's active on social media will recognize.
It really started in 2016 in the run-up to the last presidential election. I just started becoming very alarmed about the kind of quality and bias of information that people would use to support their arguments to their friends on Facebook. I thought it might be helpful to just kind of map it like better, worse, left and right. So I just started piecing it together on my own just to explain to my friends. We've had this overabundance and proliferation of online news sources, and most of it is in the area of analysis and opinion. If people understood that the sources they're consuming are actively making them angrier and polarizing them, then they might choose to consume less of that.
Otero's chart categorizes the media landscape using two domains: facts versus editorializing, and left versus right-leaning views.
It's a two-dimensional taxonomy. So the vertical axis is quality. So in general, the better quality, best quality stuff is at the top, and the lowest quality stuff is at the bottom. The horizontal axis is bias. So you have like your neutral or balanced stuff in the middle.
Well, we can see a problem right off the bat here. I've been on this Ad Fonte's website to look at this, and it's obviously it's not perfect, but when you can see you've got CBS News and ABC News right up here at the top, there, come on, man. There's just no way to. They're all outlets for propaganda. That is what Operation Mockingbird ultimately revealed, was that CIA had, as you heard here, had not necessarily taken their agents and sent them in to become reporters, but they had compromised, paid, however they coerced or compelled people who were already reporters. Some say, who knows, you can't know for sure, that Anderson Cooper today is probably one of the most obvious and well-known Mockingbird types. Clearly a mouthpiece for it. Now you might be saying, but the CIA they don't operate domestically. Well, that's fine and dandy. These news reports do go out to the rest of the world, so there is a justification for using that. But either way, the FBI, the CIA, tomato. One of the most nefarious and twisted details about the global elite's current pursuit of full-spectrum dominance is likewise a central theme in the current American version, and we see it clearly exemplified by incendiary headlines like this one. And that is the fact that these satraps, these prefects, governors, advisors, captains, and counselors are pedophagging the people with equally deceitful devices as were used by the Nazi regime to smother speech and preempt truth. Whereas the Nazi regime operated mostly by overt propaganda and the brute force of jackboots. The kind of psychological subversion we see at work here is unprecedented because they do not have the transformational power of truth on their side, and they know it. Via the media, they are gaslighting us all with political and ideological theater meant to make you think that the real threat might just be your neighbor. It might be the boy next door. It might be the young lady from Sunday school. Or it could even be you. The psychological operation at work here takes advantage of the moral law written on every heart by extending the labels of hate and intolerance more broadly in order to be able to associate those labels onto others, whoever they might want to, as needed, and to add these labels to any and all dissenters, to discredit. In 1924, Adolf Hitler wrote that propaganda's task is not to make an objective study of the truth insofar as it favors the enemy, and then set it before the masses with academic fairness. Its task is to serve our own right always and unflinchingly. Nazi propaganda often portrayed oppositions as engaged in a conspiracy to provoke war or whatever. Following the Nazi seizure of power in 1933, Hitler established a Reich Ministry of Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, headed by Joseph Goebbels. The ministry's aim was to ensure that the Nazi message was successfully communicated through art, music, theater, films, book, radio, educational materials, and of course through the press. Propaganda campaigns created an atmosphere tolerant of violence against certain parties, would be Jews in this case, against opposition, and also encouraged passivity and acceptance of uncomfortable measures that would be coming. Today, we see that as when we're asked to take austerity measures. You need to cut back on your consumption of energy. You need to cut back. You need to not drive as much. You need to walk more, ride your bike. But it does. The propaganda encourages people to acquiesce, to just accept whatever uncomfortable measures might be coming, as the leaders depict themselves as the ones who are going to step in and restore order. That is the problem reaction solution. That is the Hegelian dialectic as applied to social engineering. Films, in particular, played an important role in disseminating propaganda in Nazi Germany, labeling and guilt by association of anyone who dissented. Boy, is that alive and well today. Did anybody watch the Grammys? The role of newspapers in Germany employed propaganda to elicit support or at least acquiescence for policies that people would otherwise never have agreed to. Authorities used propaganda to cover up atrocities and mass murder. Propaganda was used to mobilize the population, to effectively mobilize the German population to support of the Nazi regime's policies. Until the very end of the regime, they used this tactic. Nazi propaganda served to secure the acquiescence of millions of others as bystanders to racially targeted persecution and mass murder. And that's what happens. That's what happens when we stand by and allow these prefects and satraps and captains and counselors to do what they do without any resistance at all, without any statement. We become as bystanders even, we become accomplices. Back to CNN. These groups dream of striking exactly the right spots in the power grid. Talking about these supremacy groups, these, in this case, this couple here. CNN says that they dream of, well, this is actually the Business Insider article, I believe. Government reports have warned for decades that hitting these spots in the power grid could cause a domino effect and leave huge parts of the country in the dark. Brian Harrell, this is from the CNN article, we mentioned him earlier, from Homeland Security, former Homeland Security agent over infrastructure. He says, quote, if you were to target 8 or 9 very key nodes throughout the United States, you potentially could have a collapsing effect. Just advertise it. Come on. High voltage transmission power lines and substations are often spread across the country in out of the way places, which can be hard to keep safe and technically challenging to secure. Granger Morgan, an engineering professor at Carnegie Mellon University, told CNN it's inherently very difficult to harden or protect it all. It may not take all that high-tech an approach to cause physical disruption that could have very large consequences, unquote. Now, one of the reasons here that they're using, the justification that they're saying that these white supremacist groups, these neo-Nazi groups are rising up, is because of Title 42. Title 42, the U.S.-Mexico border in El Paso, which is under a state of emergency due to a surge of migrants crossing into the city. The U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts recently issued an administrative stay to temporarily leave in place Title 42, which is a pandemic-era policy to quickly expel migrants at the border. They keep them from coming in. So Biden administration is engaged in keeping, right? It's all, everything they say is just deception. Anyway, border officials expect an even larger migrant surge at the border if and when Title 42 is lifted. And so the so-called white supremacy groups are, they obviously they would believe in nationalism. They would believe that the border should be shut down and people should not be allowed in. DHS warned of domestic violent extremist threats related to the end of Title 42, which would open the gates back up. Right now, there is no central authority that regulates the entire power system, and that is the big point here. That is the goal. Centralized power and getting the power grid and the whole energy industry in government control. As Morgan said, there is no central authority that regulates the power grid now. He says that gets in the way of changes that are needed to make the system more robust and resilient from attack. Now, I think this is a good spot, Summer, to go ahead and since we've got it set up now where hopefully we've laid a foundation so that you can understand why we're extremely skeptical of these reports, right? And now let's learn, now that you understand kind of how it works when these people are put forward as sometimes they're patsies, sometimes they're really involved in these activities, but they're used do you think, Summer's going to give you the details. After she gives you these details, you decide, do you think, is it in any way possible that these two were going to take out the East Coast or something?
Yeah, so thank you. That was a really excellent setup. I guess where I'll start with this is that I've been looking at the storyline and the language, so the trigger phrases, the trigger words, combing through 10 different sources that was that covered this story, like from Politico, BBC, NBC, USA Today, Twitter, HuffPost, Washington Examiner, nextgov.com, CNN, Fox, of course. So one of those, what you just brought up a moment ago about the charge makes the headlines and the retraction is nearly invisible. That's a really strong statement, and this applies right with that statement.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. So, because when we think about like what happened with the power grid in North Carolina and Moore County.
Right. Yeah.
And
Pinehurst, for those of you who live in the area.
Yes.
Southern Pines.
So what happened there was a flurry on Twitter that, this drag show was targeted by Christians who wanted to shut down the drag show, and all this outrage was going on, right? So there's an incident and a moment where you see the charge makes the headlines, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at what we're going to look at right now. Is I'm just going to read to you guys a little bit of the blurbs that were coming out of the MSM, the mainstream media. Some of the story components. So, you see language like extremists target the power grid in Baltimore. Neo-Nazi leader and Maryland woman allegedly plotted to completely destroy Baltimore.
To completely destroy.
Yeah. No drama, no melodrama there. And then that's being said by the Justice Department. And the charges come as domestic violence experts have warned that attempts by extremist groups to attack power facilities are trending up. Well, of course, right? Because that's
they're trending up in the news.
They write the talking points themselves.
Exactly.
So, as part of a white power philosophy called accelerationism, which wants to destroy society and replace it with one based on their racist ideologies. And Brad and I were talking about this before the show. Like, isn't that in fact what they're doing?
Yeah.
So the gaslighting element of this.
That's actually what's really devious and insidious about this, is that these are the tactics that they actually use. So as they are using tactics that the Nazi regime used, meanwhile they're also painting their opposition to be Nazis. Now that is really gaslighting.
It is, and inserting quotes like, and this is how people think in pictures, and people love stories, and when you put quotes into news articles like this, it does something to people. It starts to build that story. It starts to build that. It starts to hold up stereotypes. So inserting quotes in articles like, "With the power off, when the lights don't come back on, all hell will break loose, making conditions desirable for our race to once again take back what is ours." Right? So, putting lines like that into the mix, that's what, Russell and his accomplice were after. In the MSM storyline, it stated that conspiracy theories and extremist movements, so this is plural, conspiracy theorists and extremist movements abroad have also found critical infrastructure an appealing target. During the early months of COVID-19 pandemic, a wave of arson attacks across Britain targeted cell towers based on the falsehood that 5G technology was somehow spreading coronavirus. So there you go. There's that, they put that in there. Another element that they put in is various extremists have recently attempted to destroy a number of electrical facilities across the country. In the last 3 months, people have attacked at least 9 substations in Nevada, Washington, Oregon, North and South Carolina. Driven by their ideology of racially motivated hatred, the defendants schemed to attack local power grid facilities. Okay, so, and Brad went over this a little bit a while back, but via the CNN article that came out days before the Baltimore story came out, was a quote, "There's no doubt in my mind that 2023 is probably going to be the most catastrophic when it comes to the uptick of DVE, domestic violent extremist attacks on electrical infrastructure. A number of individuals and extremist groups online right now have already signaled that this is part of their playbook. A vulnerable power grid in the crosshairs of domestic extremist groups attacking the power grid is set to start a race war, is what's in the mix." So again, just taking bits and bobs from these mainstream media sources. So one thing that this is doing as well is, okay, here's one of the solutions that is proposed in the articles that were parroted, from different vendors and different websites, is that they're setting this precedent for having a domestic terrorism unit. Problem, reaction, solution.
Yeah.
So, you see the Justice Department is looking to now form a new domestic terrorism unit. Okay, so, quote, "No one at the moment has authority to deal with the entire system, and we need to get that situation fixed. Yeah. Right now, there is no central authority that regulates the entire power system, which gets in the way of changes needed to make the system more safe," right?
Safety
is a virtue.
It's all stay safe.
Yeah. So the Department of
we're all in this together.
Mm-hmm. The Justice Department will not tolerate those who threaten critical infrastructure in the name of domestic violent extremism.
They shouldn't, right? And they shouldn't tolerate that, but they shouldn't also be involved in creating it out of whole cloth either.
Right. And another quote from authorities: "We are united and committed to using every legal means necessary to disrupt violence, including hate-fueled attacks. The threat posed by domestic violent extremists is evolving and persistent," says the FBI. So
there's another piece that adds to that point right there,
okay,
from the maybe it's the Business Insider article that says, they say, the local law enforcement, they might miss these signs. They're not quite as sophisticated as we are. They might miss the signs. They might not see it coming, and might not know when these things are ideologically motivated. Right? And that's what some of these extremism experts worry. So that they might not be able to properly flag these attacks.
Yeah.
To federal investigators. In other words, they might not add to the narrative we're trying to create here.
Yeah. It's interesting times for sure that we're in right now, and just to be able to read these things, read between the lines. So sort of to give the overarching umbrella viewpoint here. So some key overview talking points are that the FBI says its agents thwarted a plan to take out Maryland's power grid. The FBI said that people accused of planning the attack blabbed to an FBI informant. So we're made to believe that that they were just, talking about their plans too openly, and that they were talking with an FBI informant. So that's how they thwarted the plans. And Sarah Clendaniel and Brandon Russell were charged with conspiracy to destroy an energy facility. So when we're talking about the two characters being presented here, Sarah Clendaniel of Maryland, and then Brandon Russell of Florida, Clendaniel spoke to an FBI informant about her plans last week, supposedly, according to authorities. Clendaniel allegedly told the FBI confidential a confidential source that she planned to target 5 substations. Quote, it would probably permanently, completely lay this city to waste if we could do that successfully, she boasted. The affidavit reveals the 2 defendants were in separate prisons for past crimes and communicated online and had a relationship. So she was in Maryland prison for robbing convenience stores with a machete. So she's this mad woman with a machete, violent. Clandaniel was recently said to have had little to lose because she suffers from kidney illness. So something apparently is wrong with her kidneys. That's sad. It is. So she doesn't, it's claimed that she doesn't have long to live. Russell was in prison for holding making bomb materials. So we're going to look at Russell for a moment, who is the founder of Atomwaffen Division, which means nuclear weapons in German. And it's also known as an international far-right extremist group. So this is your boy right here that you're looking on the screen here. Atomwaffen or its offshoots have been banned in the UK, Canada, Australia, according to BBC. Russell, a neo-Nazi group bent on ushering in the collapse of civilization, according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, a nonprofit civil rights activist organization.
So that's a group that they probably have our names, by the way. We're probably on that list too.
Yeah, easily. Russell, according to the charging documents, ascribes to having neo-Nazi beliefs and had started his own local National Socialist group. So if you want to jump over to, are you on the Wikipedia page right now?
Yeah, we're there. Yeah, we're on, I've got Wikipedia there. Okay. Got the Atomwaffen. I'm on the Atomwaffen page.
Yeah. I'll just keep moving through the points here.
All right.
So Russell was sentenced to 60 months in prison in January 2018 after pleading guilty to possession of an unregistered device and improper storage of explosive materials. It's like, what kind of unregistered device? In that case, according to court documents, Russell's roommate at the time told authorities that he was the leader of a neo-Nazi group to which their 2 other roommates belonged, and that they were planning to attack the U.S. infrastructure, including a nuclear power plant and power lines along the interstate of 75. The roommate was being interviewed by authorities after he had killed 2 other roommates because he said they bullied him for converting from neo-Nazi beliefs to Islam. Court documents showed. So there's that. Russell has a detailed Wikipedia page, which you're on right now. One of the things that you can see when you read that
That's
page,
interesting. Is that not weird?
Yes.
Who is this guy? And he's all of a sudden, he's got this super detailed Wikipedia page.
Yeah, if you do Wikipedia searches on Brandon Russell and Wikipedia searches on Atomwaffen Division, you're going to see quite a lot of information here. And one of the things that is stated is that Atomwaffen Division has recruited several veterans and current members of the U.S. Armed Forces who trained the organization's members to use firearms in military tactics. A U.S. Navy officer was expelled for allegedly recruiting 12 members for the group, and 4 affiliated U.S. Marines were charged with trafficking and manufacturing firearms for the group. Right? Atomwaffen members have also sought to train with Russians, and they have involvement over in the Ukraine. So that's pretty heavy, you know. In other words, what we're dealing with is what they're saying is that this guy is the ringleader, the guy who started this particular movement, and they've got headquarters in Texas, in Estonia, Germany, Canada, Italy, Finland. So this is quite a huge narrative here, right? Active regions this group is in United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, Baltic states, Russia, Switzerland, Italy, Finland, Ireland, and other European countries. Because what we do know is in the Western world, in the Western countries, we see that there's this idea of far-right extremism. So it's not just something like they put a particular vibe to it, right? When they're pushing this narrative on the individual countries, but this is not just something that's developing carefully like an orchestra here in the US. It's something that is being parroted throughout the world, throughout the Western world, through the media. Trigger phrases and keywords that are peppered throughout as per usual. You're just going to hear domestic extremist groups.
Did you see, by the way, that their numbers? I mean, look at how huge this group is.
Yeah.
Full members in the United States, they've got 80. They've got 80, right? Several dozen in Canada and Germany.
But look at this page.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Right. I mean, these things, this is where you start seeing inconsistencies and you start to realize that this right here, folks, is a manufactured operation of some kind, or it's just sitting out there and it's easily to be used as one. How many of these are out there just ready to be deployed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, I could go on with just some it's just, you just see racially fueled attack, racially motivated extremists, far right extremists, attack. And here's one of your new boogeymen. Here's one of your new enemies.
Exactly. Yeah, you need to be very afraid of, white people, right? Now, you know, the reason that we drill down on this topic is not to come here and be shocking. The point is, there's I had it on the whiteboard earlier, but I erased it, so I'm going to have to try to remember it now. There's a pathway that must be taken because ultimately, objective truth has to be destroyed. Or it has to be subverted so badly that no one even bothers to try. Who are the holders of objective truth? That would be the Christians. And I do mean, when I say Christians, fundamentalist Christians. I don't mean
Bible-believing Christians.
Bible-believing, right. Bible-living.
Bible-living Christians, yes.
Right.
Yes.
And there's a pejorative term, fundamentalism, is where just people take ideas out of context and they live in according to their own ideas. But it is the true believing church that ultimately must be castrated. It must be made impotent. It can't be of any effect or consequence. So it has to be discredited. And the way to discredit the church in America, which has been going on for a good while now, they are really making inroads on that right now. We've covered that here for several months with the Respect for Marriage Act and
the Disrespect for Marriage Act.
The Disrespect for Marriage Act. And also the Inflation Reduction Act, all these things this year where they just made it so much easier to shut down dissent. This also plays into that because this is going, there is a continuum over here, according to the narratives that were given, the reality, right? They're redefining reality. That's what the goal of the controllers, the people who are deciding what the narrative is going to be, what's going to go out into the media, what you're going to be consuming. They've developed a continuum. And over here on one side, you have far right extremism, white supremacy. And over here on this side, you have, it's extreme liberal communism, totalitarianism. Mm-hmm. So as you come from the right side and come closer toward the middle, you come through, it's usually associated with white people and eventually Christian people. Now this is their continuum. This doesn't have anything to do with what is true. And so but
it's definitely further just sprinkling in with consistency as they do this idea of these hate groups, these far right extremist groups that you have to be aware of.
Yeah. So to associate, right? That's it. To associate the Christianity with extremism, right? That's the goal. And with terrorism, to associate Christians with terrorism. And there are all kinds of scholarly papers in this. I'll show you a couple here that I came across just in only in researching this yesterday. Let's see where I've got it here. Yeah, here's one. Terrorist attacks targeting critical infrastructure in the United States. This is a historical look from 1970 to 2015. I read some of this now, and it's interesting. And there's also this in mayhem, murder, and misdirection. Violent extremist attack plots against critical infrastructure in the United States from 2016 up to now. Right? They say violent extremism. I say this essay provides analysis on issues related to violent and nonviolent extremism. The program spearheads innovative and thoughtful academic inquiry. Academic inquiry. The George Washington University. That strengthens extremism research as a distinct field of study. This paper reviewed 94 cases of individuals charged in the U.S. federal court system from 2016 to 2022 with planning to conduct violent extremist attacks, 35 of whom attempted to attack critical infrastructure systems. So they say, as Summer introduces to accelerationists, an ideology and doctrine which has risen in the past decade, this document says, it likely fueled the increased risk of attack plots within the white supremacist milieus targeting critical infrastructure and the energy sector in particular. They say we saw a huge spike in white supremacist cases starting targeting critical infrastructure between 2020 and 2022. That was Ilana Krill, who has written.
Again, I mean, think about these trigger words and trigger phrases, where they're talking about extremist movements with an S, conspiracy theorists, various extremists. So that's them saying we've got a whole bunch of these guys that can fit under this umbrella.
Right. Accelerationism. So that's a term you're going to need to know, and we want to try to equip you.
DVE, domestic violent extremist, is another one.
So if we can equip you to be able to navigate this world we're in, that would be one of our purposes here. Accelerationism. If you hear that term, just to understand what they mean by that is it's the idea that inspires white supremacist killers around the world. They want to accelerate mayhem. They want to accelerate the society falling apart. That's what they say. And that is.
They call it a white power philosophy.
Yeah, and it is a fact that is what these groups do believe, and that's what they do. That is their doctrine they teach inside their movements. But the question is who's actually, we're not saying those things don't exist, we're just saying who's actually behind this news story that just came out on Monday, right? When 2 days before, the pump had been primed with all these other stories. In late July, FBI Director Christopher Wray reported that the FBI had made as many domestic terrorism arrests in 2019 as it did in all of 2018. And further, that, quote, a majority of the domestic terrorism cases that we've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence. He says these killings were often linked to the alt-right, described as an outgrowth of the movement's rise in the Trump era. A radical white supremacist ideology, one that dismisses the alt-right as cowards, unwilling to take matters into their own hands. Of course, that's what they're telling us because they're writing the narrative anyway. It's called accelerationism, and that's the term they've given it. It rests on the idea, as Summer already stated, I'll just state it again here for confirmation, just so we know what it is they believe. It's the idea that Western governments are gone. They're irreparably corrupt. Now, a lot of people hold that view. So that's the first prong of accelerationism and white supremacist groups, is that Western governments are corrupt beyond repair. Now, let me just ask you a question. How many of you out there have that feeling, but you're not a neo-Nazi? This is how these things can be used. These buckets, right? These little ghettos that they can throw you into. They can,
like you're not a climate change denier, are you?
Yeah. Well, they believe that this accelerationism ideology that these academics have defined for us. They say that what these white supremacists believe is that the best thing they can do is accelerate their demise by sowing chaos and creating political tension. They will even say accelerationism even would even mean that we don't take part in the political process. We don't vote. And if we do vote, we're going to vote for whoever the most radical candidate is. Even if it's a radical leftist, vote for that one, because whoever's going to take it down the road to destruction faster. Right? That's the idea. Accelerationist ideas have been cited in mass shooter manifestos all over the place. You'll hear this. It's definitely a part of the ongoing narrative that's been building, that is created as a pocket to throw people into when they're dissenting. Anybody who stands up and criticizes the government today, well, you just might be. Right? If you think
you're going to be labeled a terrorist,
right? Do you think
extremist?
You think maybe the Biden administration is just? Do you think they're selling the country out? Well, if you say that publicly, now there is a group for you to be associated here with you, so that you can just be discredited and done away with.
Well, the other story that broke over the last 2 weeks, last week, is in the same theme is the issue with the balloon.
Yeah.
So that's another.
Yeah, you've got an article on that too, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear it.
The Washington Examiner. So the Washington Examiner is quoting sources within the intelligence community who say the Chinese balloon floating over America from west to east is likely on a mission to collect intel that would aid the Chinese in launching an EMP attack. Okay, so this came out just a few days ago. Most of you have heard about it, I'm sure. How could you not? The Washington Examiner has become increasingly influential in conservative political circles. They've actually hired a bunch of their talent from the Washington Times. That's just a little backstory on them. EMP experts have warned that China, North Korea, Russia, and Iran have programs to hit the U.S. grid with electromagnetic pulse weapons that would cut the cord for a year or longer. A congressional report has warned that a blackout like this could result in millions of deaths. The Eastern grid generates 75% of U.S. electricity and supports most of the population. So virtually any nuke detonated anywhere near the Eastern grid would collapse the entire Eastern grid, not just the area within the EMP field, because of cascading failures that would ripple outwards. High altitude balloons, such as the one China has floated over mountain state military bases this week, are considered a key delivery platform for secret nuclear strikes on America's electric grid, according to intelligence officials. So on Friday, China, one of the people quoted in the article is saying that China's recent balloon flyover of the United States is clearly a provocation and is an aggressive act. It was most likely a type of dry run meant to send a strategic message to the U.S., and this person calls that we must not take that message for granted. So the other thing that I want to push forward here is electromagnetic pulses, whether caused by an international EMP attack or a naturally occurring geomagnetic disturbance from severe space weather, could disrupt critical infrastructure such as the electrical grid, communications equipment, water and water waste systems, and transportation, of course. So there you have it. We've got two formidable possible perpetrators on the electrical grid.
All right, let's name the problem, reaction, solution.
Whack-a-mole.
In problem, reaction, solution, what new problems? All right, there have to be new threats. The threats have to be changing all the time. So we've identified the new threats that they're telling us about here today are white supremacists, far right people who want to take out the power grid, even if it's just a couple of ne'er-do-wells here. Apparently, is what it looks like to me. But or we've also got China, right? Who clearly they want you to believe has
China, North Korea, Russia,
right?
Iran.
They have access to our airspace anytime they like, apparently, and they could bring a nuclear payload in pretty easily. That's what that
It could be severe space from weather.
So that's the third one is space weather. So these are three new threats that they want to make sure you are aware of, right? That you're aware of these threats. And the EMP issue has always been one that's really the problem with the EMP attack is this. If it happens, you won't know it happened. Your electronics just won't work. There won't be any huge explosion. There won't be it's not like a nuke. It's not like that. It's a pulse. You could say a burst of energy that overwhelms circuits, and it's not really even understood how powerful or how widespread an event like this could be. You could not take out the entire country. You probably couldn't even take out a whole state. But to take down cities or regionally affect some people, you could possibly do that. But the fear of the EMP is what's really being sold. Now, here's the thing about the EMP attack. If we woke up tomorrow morning and the power was out and the news said it was an EMP attack, I don't know how we would know the news said it if there was no grid, but if someone was circulating flyers, it was an EMP attack, how would you know if it was? You wouldn't have any way to know. So an EMP attack that takes down the whole grid, you could shut down the whole grid in the United States and tell the people that it was an EMP attack. And no one knows any better. People don't understand how this technology
it's just like
works.
A bunch of it's just once again our favorite word, plausible deniability.
Yeah, they could just flip the switch, and then the message is, well, it was an EMP, and it took us out. So.
And we've got this new system that we're going to be, putting online because, this is a great time to update our whole system. And if you want to be a part of it, you need to be compliant with X, Y, and Z.
These are the mechanisms of dictatorship. That's what we're dealing with here. Dictators want to disconnect the people from truth and reality, as we say here all the time. What they're doing is they want to redefine reality. And they invent their own language. They employ terror and repression when necessary. And they do all this through propaganda, mind control. Those are the preferred methods. They repeatedly seduce the people into collective amnesia. If you're just joining us, we defined the term memory hole for you earlier. That's essentially what that is, a collective amnesia about what really happened. China has done this recently, and let me tell you something, China is the model for the world. They've reinvented dictatorship in a very specific way, a state the likes of which has never been seen before. And they've done it with the help of technologies that really are designed to dissect people's brains. And the way it's achieved therapeutically or psychologically with psychological operations is through language. When it comes to authoritarian personalities and systems, through the primary intention is not to deceive, but to intimidate. Right? Let's keep that in mind. Ultimately, it's going to get to a point where they don't care if you believe what they're telling you. They're going to intimidate you into doing what, and fear is a tactic of intimidation as well. That's why the lies of autocrats are often shameless and outlandish. The autocrat ultimately doesn't care whether people believe him. He doesn't want to convince everyone, but he does want to subjugate everyone. One essential feature of power is that however great it becomes, it's never completely sure of itself. That's something we can take advantage of, knowing that these leaders are generally paranoid. They fear losing power. That's part of a powerful man's nature. It's why he feels compelled to subdue the masses again and again. Above all, the lie is his greatest weapon. The lie serves his purpose. But intimidation is only half the story. It's just as important to sow confusion, to disrupt the rationality and reality that give people a frame of reference, to take the compass away from the nation and the world. So you have to make everyone else a liar and a cheat too. If everybody always lies to you, the consequence is not that you believe the lies, but rather that nobody believes anything anymore. But a population that no longer believes anything is robbed of its ability to think and to judge, and ultimately of its capacity to act. Philosopher Hannah Arendt says, with such a people, you can then do whatever you please. These are the ideal subjects, or the ideal opponents. In a world where the distinction between truth and lies has been abolished, there are just facts and alternative. The dominant values are not morality and a sense of responsibility, but usefulness and profit. If you do see the truth, it will do you no good to tell it. In fact, it's dangerous to do so. Best of all is to acknowledge the lie as true and embrace it passionately. That's what the fanatics do. And the next best thing is to deliberately to avoid learning the truth altogether. Cognitive dissonance. If you do happen upon the truth, you should keep quiet and pretend that you haven't. This is how it works in the Chinese system. There's no room for common sense here. Or rather, ignorance is the new common sense. It's necessary for survival, or it's used to justify opportunistic advancement. The whole business of truth, recognizing it and communicating it through language, is philosophically difficult. The name is only a guest in reality. The honesty of deceit. In a community, people make an effort to come closer to what is true, to gain a shared understanding of a world that looks slightly different to every individual. But the autocrat deliberately takes the world off its hinges, keeps everyone off balance. He redefines reality, and creates a world in his own image, according to his will, where things often mean the opposite of what they used to mean. Aware of the deception, but they participate in the deception for gain, security, and power. That's what citizens in China end up doing. And the leader in this kind of regime is always trying to create new men, new men and women to go along with this new world, structured in such a way that in the end, the last person to still believe that the earth turns around the sun will start wondering whether, after all, he's the madman. He will have to stop trusting his eyes, his ears, and his memory and simply chew the cud of the information he's being force-fed. For this reason, the free press is the autocrat's natural enemy. So that is the first thing you have to subvert and take over, is where the people get their information. Research and fact-checking by the free press equate to ideological subversion. The autocrat who wants to create his own truth needs to conquer the world, to create a harmonious society. A harmonious society. That's what's being done to all of us now. What's been done to the Chinese people for decades now. We're being harmonized. They'll fly banners, and in the news they'll tell us that we're improving your quality of life. We're making things better for you. When China's president defended globalization at the 2017 World Economic Forum in Davos, he spoke of increasing the opening up of China, while, in fact, his country was steadily sealing itself off in isolationism. But he invoked the term, global connectivity, and he was applauded for it. It's a tried and tested tactic. Steal your enemy's words and make them your own. China does have a constitution, Article 35 of which guarantees citizens of the People's Republic, quote, the freedom of speech, of the press, and of demonstration. There is a parliament in China, too, the National People's Congress. There are elections in China, and citizens are regularly exhorted to make use of their, quote, sacred and solemn right, unquote, to vote. Vladimir Lenin invented democratic centralism, a system in which, so the theory went, democratically elected functionaries should, once elected, have the privilege of dictating policy without opposition. Mao Zedong later preached the democratic dictatorship of the people, and democracy was dead. It was just a shell of a word. The words lose all meaning. Citizens are inoculated against subversive influences. And the new perverted language makes the population immune and mute. Thought steers language, but language can also steer and corrupt thought. Occupy and control the mind through language. The highest goal of the party, of the propaganda, is to unify the thinking. But it's a process that has to be carried out over and over again. To unify all thought and action, every piece of thought work has this purpose. The goal is to flay the individuality from every individual, from his feelings, his judgment, his dreams, and so that it's only this dream of unity that we have. The dream of tolerance. Or we have to get rid of hate. Stop the hate. I didn't play that. Yeah, here's Gutierrez.
Call for action from everyone with influence on the spread of mis and disinformation on the internet. Governments, regulators, policymakers, technology companies, the media, civil society. Stop the hate. And we'll also further strengthen our focus on how mis and disinformation are impacting progress on global issues, including the climate crisis. Stop the hate. Stop the hate. Set up strong guardrails. Be accountable for language that causes harm. Be accountable for language that causes harm.
There you go. That's a short we put on it earlier today. And It's telling. From time to time, both words and citizens fight back. Many of the party's warlike words have fallen prey to irony. Some of the words, for example, the word comrade, the word equivalent to comrade in China. Suddenly, it wasn't just China's ardent communists who were addressing each other as comrade. It was also members of the gay community. Or the phrase, I have been harmonized. For many years now, this has meant I have been caught by the censor. And my online comment, even my entire account, has been deleted. When the police invite someone in for a cup of tea, it is interrogation rather than a hot beverage that awaits them. Sometimes a well-known intellectual, author, lawyer, or other inciter of unrest might be traveled. Creative verb form that denotes a person's involuntary removal from the city while the party has its conference or when the foreign leader pays a visit. Here, more often than not, the function of words is to convey an order rather than a meaning. Nod, swallow, forget, and kneel to your dear leader. The party doesn't stop at interpreting reality. It also creates it. Seems fitting to conclude this piece with a quote from Confucius, who has, been a popular go-to of Xi Jinping, leader in China. Here is the philosopher's response to a people who asked what he would do first if he were handed political power. Confucius said, "He who would create order in the state must do one thing: correct the names." And that means to change the words, to redefine the terms. It's creating or building an order as opposed to the Christian way, which is shepherding truth, discipling souls. This is from a book, I've just shared with you a book. This is from We Have Been Harmonized by Kai Strittmatter, German journalist who lived and worked in China for many years. Life in China's Surveillance State. It's quite enlightening. If you want to know what the model of the world order is, that's a good part of it. So this brings us to our last segment here, Operation Drag Floyd, the operational preparation of the environment. Woke Marxism isn't just, this is, by the way, this is from James Lindsay at newdiscourses.com. Woke Marxism isn't just a bunch of crazy academic theory. It's also very practical. It's meant to be put into practice to transform the world by taking over institutions through activism. In order to do that, it wages unconventional warfare, or as it's been called in the past, nonlinear warfare, particularly narrative warfare. A key technique employed by these activists, especially in the media, is what is known as operational preparation of the environment, OPE. Woke Marxists lay narrative lines in advance of certain events so they can capitalize on them when the moment arrives. You see, that's exactly the same tactic that the American government is using today. It's what we just heard from Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations. They lay narratives out in advance so that you'll walk right into it, right? You'll walk right into their trap, and then they can capitalize on it. Understanding how they prepare these mass lines of action is critical to diffusing them. It's quite important that we pay attention, that we pay close attention here, and honor Christ by speaking the truth in love, that we refuse to honor false and destructive narratives and learn how to spot and counter operational preparation of the narrative space. So here's your alert. Operation Drag Floyd is live. Now, this is a term Lindsay has taken. He's putting the terms, George Floyd. Where the circumstances are being set up for something tragic and dramatic for some unwitting person who professes anyway to be a Christian to walk right into a trap. So what we're here to tell you today is do not fall for this trap. It's coming. This trap is coming. Don't fall for it. And so we have to mention just one more time, after all of this coverage, now we've done some reading, a lot of reading and research over the past 48 hours on what we've presented here for you tonight, and many, many hours and weeks and months before this on these topics. There is no equal time, no equal representation of this leftist Marxist movement as you find the white supremacist movements represented online. No mention of the Marxist extreme leftists who have actually been out vandalizing the country. And we showed you earlier the website, Beautiful Trouble. And there are many others. There's the Hammer. What was that, Summer? Do you remember what was the Hammer? Remember we did the Black Hammer? The Black Hammer group that we covered last year.
Oh yeah, that's a while ago.
Yeah, that Black Hammer group. You're
right.
It was really for a lot of younger. I think it was for younger folks. Let's see. Black Hammer was one that didn't really show up in the news that much. It's the Black Hammer Party. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, it says that the feds are investigating Black Hammer. It said this last year. This is from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on it.
Yeah, again, one of these stories that comes up and it just has this shock value.
Yeah. The Black Hammer, let's see right here, they disavowed something here. Anyway, you can see that there are, now there certainly are organic movements out there, but there are far more of these operations. Anyway, so there's that. The point of this is that narrative control is accelerating. More evidence that the true believing church is and will continue to be targeted and slandered as a hate group. The agent provocateurs are the left hand of an evil enemy who is taunting you so that it can justify destroying you with the solution pre-prepared in its right hand. This is nonlinear, unconventional warfare, and it is an expensive, thought-out stratagem. So what you're seeing and what you probably will see play out here in the coming weeks or maybe months, where something's going to happen, where there's going to be some drag queen, some grown man who is dressed like a woman and over-sexualizing himself. Someone's going to show up and say, this is crazy, this is a grown man, and he's here with this group of children over-sexualizing himself. Someone's going to eventually, the point is, they want to draw you into that. They want to draw you in to reacting that way. Don't fall for it. The moneyed masters of modern mayhem have deployed the drag queens and their advocates in a social engineering strategy of escalation, provocation, and temptation to compel you to resist and respond with anger and violence. Do not fall for it. Do not fall for this trap. There are things you can do to help. Saul Alinsky said, and remember, Saul Alinsky is the one who dedicated his book, Rules for Radicals, to Lucifer, right? And that is the playbook. That is the Bible of the progressive left movement, Obama, Clinton's, that sort of era. Saul Alinsky said, the real action is in the enemy's reaction. So it's provocation.
Yeah, I did a little bit of just a quick look about the Black Hammer Party.
Okay.
And if you go to their website, and then they have this big section about the COVID-19 basics. So they're just really pushing hard for, how to stay safe and how to stay sanitized and wear your mask and all of that.
Well, of course they would, I guess. It's
blackhammer.org.
Yeah, I'm at libcom.org. I'm something else. Well, thanks for that. That's good to know because it's, really? Come on. Well, Operation Drag Floyd intends 3 outcomes. 3 outcomes are that they intend on you. They want to provoke you to one of these 3 outcomes. They want to provoke you to submission, which is ultimately what destroys kids. They want to provoke you to reaction. And then ultimately they want to provoke you to compel and coerce you into the solution. These all suit their goals. In submission, it means that children are exposed to grooming. Children are exposed to psychological damage and eventual self-destruction at the end of a path of activism that wrecks families and the community. When they provoke you to reaction, they know that some people react, perhaps violently, to the provocation to protect children. We all have that instinct. So that reaction is fed into the narrative arc that's already in the media. Rising anti-LGBTQ hate, quote unquote, and what Lindsay calls stochastic terrorism. This cannot happen. You cannot allow this to happen. This is certain defeat. This is a big L if we fall into this. Do not be violent. In fact, discourage violence. Your natural inclination to protect children will be turned into an opportunity for their provocateurs and their mainstream media agents to make a whole religion seem racist, barbaric, and unwelcome. Right? They must be removed from society, they'll say. And they're good at this because they train for it. And the narrative arc is already prepared. In many cases, it's already been laid. It's nothing but a loss. Don't fall for it. And then they want to provoke you to solution. Lindsay writes, a strong man who actually serves the interests of the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, who the media reports is a far-right extremist, is going to appear. He's going to rise up. He's going to appear to be on your side. A lot like this Newsweek op-ed where the medical student came out and confessed that we did COVID all wrong. Someone like that, someone kind of like Donald Trump, is going to rise, right? And he's going to be a servant of the United Nations, the World Economic Forum. He's going to be a servant of the globalist movement, but he's going to say everything you want to hear. And the media is going to report that he is a far-right extremist. And he's going to come out with a solution. This is a lot like an Antichrist figure. He's going to present a solution to the problem, but this is just for one side. And his solution to the problem is going to be violence. If the provocation becomes severe enough, they expect us to gladly hand over our rights so that the authorities, whoa, hang on. I dropped it. Testing the waters. Testing the waters again. You guys don't remember that a couple years ago? I started the show out and I was like, we're going to test the waters tonight. And I knocked my water over into my lap.
You got fired up.
Yeah.
It's good though. Keep preaching.
Well, we just have to make sure that we don't fall for this. Because if they provoke people and it becomes severe enough, then what the establishment is going to do is they're just going to say, well, it's just too dangerous out there, and they're going to expect you to gladly hand over your rights so that the authorities can punish the groomers. Are you listening to me?
Or we'll look at, again, like how they've tied this group, the Atomwaffen division, with being in cahoots with the armed forces and the Navy and the Marines.
Yeah, those articles. There's lots of articles out there.
So maybe we need to bring in the UN troops, because these other soldiers are compromised.
Right. Ultimately, that's what's going to happen. This grooming of the children serves many purposes. One of them is to get you so angry that you're going to call for whatever it takes to shut down this grooming. Then they've won. Of course, we
You're
do.
You're gonna be begging for the solution that they've set before you to want.
That is an excellent point, and that's the way to say it. That's exactly how it needs to be verbalized. You're going to be begging for their solution. If you fall for their
booby
ruse.
traps.
Yeah. This is the pit. Do not fall into the pit. There is no return from the pit. Don't fall into it. What can be done? First of all, you can protect your kids individually. Tell friends and neighbors to protect their kids individually. Do not try to save them all. Number 2, publicize these escalations so that consciences can get shocked and the half-captured, half-asleep law will be forced to recognize it. Number 3, do not be violent. Do not encourage violence. Condemn violence as a solution or reaction. Now, for those of you who are going to want to leave a comment, we're not talking about self-defense here. We're talking about falling for a trick, falling into a trap. Discourage violence. Condemn violence. Don't be violent. Don't fall for the trap of using violence as a solution or as a reaction. Number 4, spread the word about the logic of these operations, about how they're laid well in advance for you to walk right into it. Number 5, do not trust the strong men that show up with solutions. When you see that conservative, perhaps professing Christian who shows up with the solutions and it has in some way to do with violence, those may be proffered to you on purpose. Number 6, break the narrative with truth. Now that's what we really try to offer here. Unconventional warfare. Tell the truth with evidence about drag queen story hour and all of it. There's no need for emotion. Tell the truth about provocation and enemy strategy. But more, tell the truth about why people are upset. People are not upset. It's not rising anti-LGBTQ hate. It's the grooming of kids and societal provocation is why people are upset. Make it crystal clear. If you want to move the masses on the issue, that will be done with caution. It will take some planning, and it will require a lot of prayer. Persecution is a promise from Christ. If you're a follower of Christ, persecution is a promise. Indeed, all who desire to live godly in Christ will be persecuted, 2 Timothy 3:12. But that does not mean we're to do nothing about it. Christians are to be active, promoting the gospel first, working against the rise of secularism, and seeking to present the truth of God's word to the lost. And for doing this, we will face opposition. The point is this: the actual doctrines that are at stake here aren't the doctrines of the He Gets Us campaign. They're not the doctrines of Dallas Jenkins and the Chosen. The actual doctrines that are at stake here are not Kenneth Copeland's Church's doctrines. It's not Sean Foyt's revivalism movement. All of those will be approved versions of Christianity. What's at stake here are the doctrines of fundamental Christianity, period, everywhere, all the time. Wherever biblical Christianity has been or is found. Al Mohler writes, so the logic of this argument is that if you are a fundamentalist, are you now or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Well, now it's going to sound more like this. Are you now or have you ever been a member of First Baptist Church or Grace Community Church or whatever? Are you now or have you ever been a faithful, biblical Christian holding to the doctrinal convictions of Christianity through 2 millennia? If you think that's not so much a pressing question, let me tell you, it is the only important question behind this development in the news. We need to understand that the argument is easily understood as a direct assault on the ability of fundamental Christians to participate in the public square and to speak on public issues. The argument here that they provide is that your religious beliefs disqualify you because your religious beliefs are outside the appropriate pale of discourse in the United States of America today. The truth is, everybody has a God. Everybody has a religion. Only one of them is true. And these movements are most certainly religious. There are prominent teachers in Christian outlets publishing articles and other pieces telling Christians to be worried about being misunderstood and persecuted for being misunderstood. Right? There's a lot of professing Christians, a lot of people who really are Christians who are not seeing clearly what's happening right now, and they're warning their brothers and sisters that we need to be worried that people are going to misunderstand us, that we're going to be persecuted because people misunderstand us. They think we're saying something we're not saying. They're even telling pastors to hide sermons, to keep some of the truths out of the public and only for the members, and to present a different face to the community. They're worried that the people of today will be enraged by Christian teachings that they might take the wrong way. They're going to take it the wrong way because that's what God said they would do. Matthew Littlefield says, I think it's much more likely that Christians will be hated for what they are clearly understood to be saying, as was the case for Jesus himself. Matthew chapter 26. There we go. Sorry, bear with me. Matthew chapter 26, if you're following along, if you're playing along with the home game. We're going all the way down to verse 57. Matthew 26, 57. Then those who seized Jesus led him to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders had gathered. And Peter was following him at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and going inside, he sat with the guards to see the end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were seeking false testimony against Jesus, that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last 2 came forward and said, This man said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to rebuild it in 3 days. And the high priest stood up and said, Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? But Jesus remained silent. And the high priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God, tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. And Jesus said to him, You have said so. But I tell you, from now on, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his robes and said, "He has uttered blasphemy. What further witnesses do we need? You've now heard his blasphemy. What is your judgment?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spit in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Christ. Who is it that struck you?" Within the context of their culture, to claim to ride on the clouds of heaven was to claim the highest divinity. To a Jew in this time, this was the clearest claim to divinity Jesus could make. He was claiming to be the God of the Exodus who rode the cloud above his people. He was claiming to be the divine cloud riding Son of Man from Daniel's vision in chapter 7. They knew what he was claiming, and they were enraged by it. Our culture has different social rules and assumptions, but it has the same spirit as those corrupt religious leaders who demanded the death of Jesus. Our modern society has a hatred for the truth that undermines the power of modern cultural elites, especially regarding sexuality, gender, and faux science. For Christians, knowingly breaking those rules and being clearly understood is what will get us. It'll get our modern preachers, our teachers, and our Christian ministries in trouble. Knowingly breaking those rules by being clearly understood, by speaking truth, that's what will get us in trouble. 1 Samuel chapter 2. Let me share these with you on the way out here. Daniel chapter 9, verse 3. Then I turned my face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer and pleas for mercy with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. This comes right after Daniel, verse 2 here, in the first year of his reign, first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus by descent, a Mede who was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years that, according to the word of the Lord to Jeremiah the prophet, must pass before the end of the desolations of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. So this is, Daniel has just perceived, he realizes that what God has said, these prophecies are true. He's just encountered the living God. And what's his reaction? Turns his face to the Lord God, seeking him by prayer, and pleas for mercy with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. What is our reaction when we run into that? Usually we're very happy to celebrate and throw a party. But Daniel prayed to the Lord his God and made confession. He prayed and made confession. Now he talks about that according to the word of the Lord, that Jeremiah in Jeremiah 25 had given the word that came unto Jeremiah concerning all the people of Judah in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, was the 1st year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, which Jeremiah the prophet spoke to all the people of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem for 23 years, from the 13th year of Josiah, the son of Ammon, king of Judah. To this day, the word of the Lord has come to me, and I have spoken it persistently to you, but you have not listened. You have neither listened nor inclined your ears to hear, although the Lord persistently sent you all his servants, the prophets, that is Daniel, saying, turn now every one of you from his evil way and evil deeds, and dwell upon the land that the Lord has given to you and your fathers from of old and forever. Do not go after other gods to serve and worship them, or provoke me to anger with the work of your hands. Then I will do you no harm. But you have not listened to me, declares the Lord, that you might provoke me to anger with the work of your hands to your own harm. Wow. Wow. Grass withers. The flower fades, but this is the living word of the living God, and this is truth then, now, and forever. Did you catch that last piece there? You've not listened to me, says the Lord. You provoke me to anger with the work of your hands to your own harm. This is what the Babylonites did when they built that city and tower complex, Tower of Babel. Just a short time after the ark came to rest, after the flood, these people remembered. They had memory of that event. They had memory that there was the ark and how it was built. And so they built the tower. Not in obedience to God. The ark was technology that was built in obedience to God, to glorify God. The tower complex was built to avoid the flood. It was the people had been commanded to go out into the earth and fill it, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. But they didn't do that. They wanted to unify and create one unified truth of their own. They wanted to be autonomous. And so they built this tower to thwart God. So this was technology for the purpose of rebellion, autonomy, disobedience to God. And so the point here is that all of these, I have to read Daniel for you. I have to finish Daniel. Jeremiah. Here we go. Therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, because of this disobedience, here's what God says. This is very important. This plays into exactly what's happening to us here today with these satraps, these prefects, these governors, these captains and counselors who are building technology in rebellion to God. Therefore, Jeremiah 25:8. Therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, because you have not obeyed my words, behold, I will send for you. I will send for all the tribes of the north, declares the Lord, and for Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant. And I will bring them against this land and its inhabitants, and against all these surrounding nations. I will devote them to destruction and make them a horror, a hissing, and an everlasting desolation. Are you paying attention? He's going to send Nebuchadnezzar, his servant. Nebuchadnezzar isn't, he's not one of God's chosen. He is not Team Yahweh, as our pastor said this weekend. We are in Daniel chapter 9, just this weekend. Really, what a gift to come across that right now at this time. So Nebuchadnezzar is God's servant, right? There is no technology, no government, no intelligence agency. None of them are out there operating out of sight from God. They're all God's servants. And so Isaiah 54. Understand this, my friends. Take this with you as a comfort. We'll go to, let's do Isaiah 45 first. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus. Now, once again, Cyrus is he is not Team Yahweh. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, his servant, Cyrus, which means his instrument, his tool, his rod, whose right hand I have grasped, to subdue nations before him and to loose the belts of kings, to open the doors before him, that gates may not be closed. I will go before you and level the exalted places. I will break in pieces the doors of bronze and cut through the bars of iron. I will give you the treasures of darkness and the hoards in secret places, that you may know that it is I, the Lord, the God of Israel, who call you by your name. For the sake of my servant Jacob and Israel, my chosen, I call you by your name. He's talking about Cyrus here. I name you, though you do not know me. I am the Lord, and there is no other besides me. There is no God. Who is it that's in charge? Who is it that causes salvation to occur? It's not any of us. I equip you, though you do not know me, that people may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none besides me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Verse 7. I form light and create darkness. I make well-being and create calamity. I am the Lord who does all these things. Isaiah 54, verses 16 and 17. Behold, I have created the smith who blows the fire of coals and produces a weapon for its purpose. I have also created the ravager to destroy. No weapon that is fashioned against you shall succeed. Brothers and sisters, here is your promise from God. No weapon that is fashioned against you shall succeed, and you shall refute every tongue that rises against you in judgment. This is the heritage of the servants of the Lord, and their vindication from me, declares the Lord. Let's go ahead and look at 55, verse 1. Come, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and he who has no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Hear that your soul may live, and I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. Behold, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander for the peoples. Behold, you shall call a nation that you do not know, and a nation that did not know you shall run to you. Because of the Lord your God and of the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. No weapon that is fashioned against you shall succeed, and you shall refute every tongue that rises against you in judgment. This is your heritage, servant of God. So this is your encouragement, my friends. Don't let yourself get down. Don't be fearful. Fear of man is a snare. Don't fear these men. They can't hurt you. To die is gain. And if that is securely, if you're holding to that, then you understand why you were born for this time, why you're living right now. You were made for this time. 1 Samuel chapter 2, verse 9 says, he will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness. Because not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces against them. He will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Some of these creatures some of these created beings, some of these men of renown, some of these leaders are most certainly the servants of God. They don't know him. China is a servant of God. They don't serve Christ, but they are a tool. The Lord says, I have created the smith who blows the fire of coals and produces a weapon for its purpose. Yes, there are weapons, but who creates the ones who make the weapons? Psalm 58:3, the wicked are estranged from the womb. These who speak lies and go astray from birth, O God, shatter their teeth in their mouth. Break out the fangs of the young lions, O Lord, and men will say, surely there is a reward for the righteous. Surely there is a God who judges on earth. Psalm 59:1. Deliver me from my enemies, O my God. Set me securely on high, away from those who rise up against me. Deliver me from those who do iniquity. Fierce men launch an attack against me, but God is my stronghold. My God in his love and kindness will meet me. God will let me look triumphantly on my foes, for you have been my stronghold and a refuge in the day of my distress. For God is my stronghold, the God who shows me loving kindness. Psalm 60, which is relevant for our position here as Americans today. Oh God, you have rejected us. You have broken us. You have been angry. Restore us. You've made your people experience hardship, that your beloved may be delivered. Save with your right hand and answer us. Give us help against the adversary, for deliverance by man is vain. Through God we shall do valiantly, and it is he who will tread down our adversary. Psalm 61, hear my cry. O God, give heed to my prayer. From the end of the earth I call to you when my heart is faint. Lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For you have been a refuge for me, a tower of strength against the enemy. Let me dwell in your house forever. Let me take refuge in the shelter of your wings. Selah. Summer from Atlanta. Well, come back, join us here as we say goodbye to everyone. Thanks for being with us tonight, my friends. We hope this has been edifying. Yes. We hope it's been inspiring. We hope you have, as every show, even though we go into these secular topics, we want you to get closer to the Lord every time that you come and visit us here. Summer, what would you like to say to the folks on our way out?
Well, I agree with what you've said there. And I also wanted to just say thank you to Sue and Brittany, Janice, Rob, Dan, Beatrice, and Gary for signing up to our newsletter. Excellent. Yeah, that is good news, folks. You can do that really too. Good news. Yeah, you can do that too. If you go to, there's a link in the description to this video where you can do that. And you can also go to the website and you'll get a pop-up there. I've dropped it in the chat a couple of times. All right, well done. And if anybody wants a free Bible and a starter pack of tracts, please don't hesitate to send us an email at hello@armoroftruth.net. And we will ship one of those out to you. If you're in the continental U.S., unfortunately, we can't ship outside the borders right now because it's so crazy expensive. But we really want to get that to you. If you want to order a Bible for a friend, just send an email over. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you all for being here tonight and being with us as always. And we pray for you. I want you to know that every week when we go to church, we keep you guys in mind. So if you have any prayer requests too, feel free to send us an email and say, hey, I'd love it if you would if you could pray for me, and we're happy to do that. We do that every week for people in our Armor of Truth family. So we love you guys, and we thank you for sticking with us.
Pray for this country, my friends. It's not a lost cause. As we read earlier, that some of the groups they were talking about, one of their main points of their ideology is that American system is too corrupt to be restored. Well, whatever you think about that, we serve God who is sovereign, he makes the choices. He's the one that's in charge there. And understand, all of these people who have risen up against the truth, we're experiencing a judgment here, right? And the most important thing that you need to know about what happens during judgment is that God protects his own. He keeps his people safe. That doesn't mean you're going to not be persecuted. Doesn't mean you're going to live through it. It just
you're
means
still going to have trials and suffering
right.
as you work out your sanctification. But God has you in his hand. And Brad and I, we were talking about they can pump us with as much nanotech as they want, but if God wants, that can just be null and void, right? So
that's what the Tower of Babel was. It was technology in rebellion, and any kind of vaccine technology or whatever, medical technology or transhumanism or whatever it might be.
God is sovereign.
Yes, he takes care of his people. He always has. So if you're not, if you're someone who don't know what we're talking about, you think this is all craziness, but it's starting to make sense to you. Understand that that's most likely, that is God drawing you to himself. And if you've heard the gospel here that God came into the world as the man, Jesus Christ, and he lived a perfect life. He was born sinless, not through an earthly father. He wasn't born into sin. He was born clean, and he kept the record clean, and he lived that perfect life and taught this ministry, was persecuted to death, told everyone that it would happen, that they would also be persecuted, those who follow him. But on that third day, he overcame the wrath. He drank the full cup of God's wrath, and death couldn't hold him. That's because he is God. Son of God is God. Rose from the dead in victory over sin and death, went to the cross to experience the debt and the suffering that we deserve, so that we could be clothed in his righteousness. He did for us what he didn't deserve, so that we could receive from him what we don't deserve, which is his righteousness. That is the gospel, my friend. You're a sinner, and you know it. And you know there's nothing you can do to save yourself. By God's grace, you don't have to save yourself. You can't do it anyway, but there is one who has made that possible, that some will be saved. And if you feel that in your heart here tonight, call out to Christ. That is your effectual call. You're not going to resist it, because it's irresistible. And if you do, email us and let us know, and we'll do our best to help you and direct you from there. God bless you, my friends.
God bless you.
And we'll see you again here next time, very soon, Lord willing. We owe you a James study for the first chapter.
We haven't forgotten.
The first 12 verses of James. We set it up with the overview last time, and we'll get that to you soon. God bless you, my friends. We'll see you soon.
Good night.
Well, that's a rather interesting position coming from a man on a crusade against the evils of technology.
I'm not against technology, Doctor. I'm against the men who deify it at the expense of human truth.
Armor of Truth, live.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
faith is resistance.
Make
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel and log on armoroftruth.net.